Beginning with your band a little higher than hip height, you're going to place the band just at the front of the hip joints. It's the place where the femur inserts into the hip socket. Start to hinge forward. Walk the hands out into a downward dog. Immediately, you're going to notice how the band supports the hips. It's continuing to pull the femurs back into the hip socket, which helps to unimpinge the hips. Let's warm up with some calf raises. You're going to simply raise the heels up as you inhale. In the exhale, you'll let the heels sink back and down. You can feel that stretch along the entire posterior chain of the body, from the heel cord all the way up through the buttocks, even into the back. As you're here, remember to keep working with the breath. Ideally, you'll breathe through the nose, creating a sound at the base of the throat. Working into shoulder external rotation, you're going to place the elbows down just under the shoulders. Keep the arms externally rotated so the hands are moving away from the midline. We call this the feather of the dog pose. Again, the band should be supporting you by pulling the hips back, and that's going to take the weight off the arms. This should allow you to improve the alignment of the shoulders. Press down through the index fingers and pop the elbows off the mat. Maintain the width across the shoulders. Can you feel how the support of the arms is in that bra strap muscle group, which wraps underneath the shoulders across the middle back, the lower trapezius? Keep pressing down through the fingertips and working on external rotation of the shoulders. Let's walk the feet a little more forward. Walk the arms out. Raise the heel of the hand so you're on your fingertips now. Try to lift the armpits forward. Can you feel the length of the arms? Can you feel the connection of the arms down through the side body, all the way down through the legs? Working into that Iyengar style long downward dog pose. Here we'll continue walking the hands forward. Eventually you might even be able to place your head on the floor. When we walk the arms out longer, it does change the bias of the pose. Ultimately, we're trying to connect as much as we can into the posture. Here we can work on the abdominal churning, the Nali Kriya. If you're not able to rotate the abdomen yet in the Nali, no problem. You can work on just getting empty through the low belly. As you exhale, notice that the low belly beneath the navel draws back and in toward the spine. Let's transition, walking the hands back a little, then walk the feet more forward, transitioning toward the forward fold position. Here you can feel the center of gravity much more forward than normal. Of course, the band is supporting your hips, and that's going to allow you to tilt your weight well forward. You can feel how the pressure is more in the toes than normal. Shifting the weight forward as much is going to help you to get the femur bones to again sink deeper into the hip sockets. This is especially valuable for people who tend to have impinged hips. As you're here, stay loose in that low belly. We always have this idea of remaining empty or hollow in the lowest lower belly. You can see that I'm demonstrating again that Nali turning of the abdomen action. You can do heel raises again. You're going to simply lift the heels as you inhale, and as you exhale, you can sink the heels back and down. That just adds a bit more dynamic movement through the system. If you're feeling comfortable and supported in this pose, you can start to move the hands back, possibly walking the hands behind the feet or holding the ankles to give yourself a little bit of an assist in the forward fold. If you're new to this position, definitely take your time and approach it with modesty. It takes some time to become comfortable with the band supporting you. But as you become more comfortable with this, you can feel that complete release into position. Continue working with your breathing. Notice how inhales create an upward moving force and exhales create a downward moving force, a sinking and settling more deeply into the posture. Transitioning now, we're going to step the feet out, working into our twisted dog shape. This is an incredible spinal rotation, reaching the right hand back toward the left ankle. Once you grab hold, you can then transition that left hand more forward, and so you assume the downward dog length of the arms. Create an opposition here as you're pulling through that ankle. Continue to feel the twist across the shoulders. We want to think of twisting above the navel. So we have a thoracic twist while maintaining a perfect square stability through the hip joints. As you loosen up, you can probably take a better grip. You can probably transition your hand out a little bit longer. Feel that the head is hanging freely, so the head maintains the neutral alignment with the spine. This is an incredible position. This is called the spinal rejuvenator by Iyengar in his famous yoga wall sequence. Continue loosening. You can probably feel the head sink closer to the floor. You can probably feel the arms getting further away from each other. Let's transition for the other side. You're going to walk the hands back a bit, so you begin in a short dog pose. Then reach the left arm toward right ankle. Once you hook up, you can then transition that right hand out. As you're working the hand out, you can feel a deepening twist across the thoracic spine. Work with your breath. Sometimes there's a tendency to rush in these postures, but don't assume that you're going to have the same depth of position on the opposite side. It usually takes a minute or two to work into that same depth. So continue working with your breathing. As you inhale, it's almost like you're resisting the twist. Then as you exhale, you can feel that release of tension and a natural deepening of the posture. Notice how the twist is occurring above the navel. We're feeling the movement across the shoulders, the thoracic spine. As you continue breathing, as you continue loosening, notice how you can walk the hand out a bit more. Notice how you can take a better grip of the ankle. And even though the body is moving towards stillness, we're not static in these positions. We're feeling the subtle movements created through breath, and then bigger movements created as we relax, loosen, and are ready to ratchet the pose a bit more. Notice the alignment of the head and neck. We're feeling that neutral position. The head is a continuation of the spine. Just stay for a couple of more breaths here. Feeling your body naturally unwinding through that twisted dog position. As we finish up our last breath here, you'll be at your full in range. Releasing the hands out forward. Enjoy just a moment longer in your dog pose. Can you notice a difference from the beginning of your practice to now? Is your dog pose longer? Do the legs feel longer? Is your head closer to the floor? Feel the length of the spine, feel the length of the low belly. And once again, we'll work through that abdominal churning of the nali. To transition out, walk the hands back. Now keep pushing the hips into the band. We'll again work into that forward fold before transitioning into the mountain pose. This transition out is really crucial. We want to feel the engagement is along the posterior chain muscles. When you do transition out, you want to keep pushing the hips into the band so you maintain the power through the legs. Otherwise, the tendency is for the band to pull you back toward the wall, and you certainly don't want that. So as you prepare, exhale first, and then when you inhale, push the hips into the band and use that power of the legs to stand. Mountain pose. Center of gravity forward, strong through the legs. And we'll transition out of the sequence completely. You're just going to walk back slightly, unload the tension from the band, and then we'll transition out. Turning for Malasana, we're going to place the band just above the hips and then step back to low tension into the band. Take your time here. If you're new to this one, it's going to be a bit challenging. We're going to work on squatting straight down. The band has you. You're going to sink back through the hips, and then you're going to drop down into a squat position. Do a few of these. You're going to squat down below parallel, and then you'll bounce back up to stand. Maintain tension throughout the posterior chain muscles. As you're doing this action, think about keeping the spine completely upright and neutral. Try to touch the bottom down to the heels, and then you can bounce back up. Finally, we'll work into our resting squat position. In the resting squat, we want to feel for the depth of the ankle, knee, and hip joints. For those of us who are tight through the ankles, the knees, or the hips, squatting down can be quite challenging. Normally, we have to shift the center of gravity forward in some way, usually by raising the heels, sometimes by turning the feet outward. The band is going to give you the proper support so that you can sit back nicely through the heels. And this should feel like a very comfortable position, hence the name the resting squat, or in Sanskrit it is Malasana, the garland pose. One of the quintessential postures here, we can feel the lengthening and decompression of the lower back. You can feel the natural flexion action through the hips. And this helps to reset many of the eliminative organs. Of course, this is the natural position for using the bathroom. As you're resting here in the squat, stay with your breath. Notice how an inhale creates a bit more dynamic tension, and notice how the exhale creates a sense of relaxation into the pose. Can you feel the lengthening, that space between the hips and the rib cage? The band is supporting just under the lower ribs, and that should give you the feel of creating space between the hips and rib cage. Can you feel your knees transition forward? Can you notice that your feet are still straight, keeping the big toes down? Can you pull the back so that you maintain an upright position in this deep squat? Just a couple of more breaths here. We're going to do several rounds of squats. This is our first round. We'll do variations in just a moment. Now, prepare for your transition out. You want to push the hips back into the band and then stand with power and control. walking forward to unload the tension. And we'll transition. You can move your band down a bit lower. We're going to work into our lunge shape. Place the band just underneath the right side gluteal fold, so it's just underneath your butt, and you're working into a lunge shape. In the lunge, you want to squeeze strongly through the bottom, and this is going to help you to load the pressure or the stretch along that hip flexor. You're going to feel this along the iliopsoas, the quadriceps, and all of the associated tissues at the anterior portion of the hip. You can add a bit of movement here. If you add just a slight side bend, that will help you to wind up even more tissues. Or if you start to sink the hips down, you can move into a deeper lunge shape. Once you gain experience in this pose, you can work on a deeper lunge by lifting that back foot. And this is quite an advanced sequence, so if you're not here yet, don't worry about it. This one can take some time to develop. But if you can, reach back and catch the instep of the right foot. This will help you to maintain the internal rotation of the femur, which is the most stable position when you're in the lunge. And you're just working with your breath. Notice that the spine stays neutral. The tendency when lunging is to overextend the hips in the low back or to tilt the hips forward. The band is very useful for maintaining the neutral position. The femur bone itself will be pulled forward into the hip socket. That loads up the tissue and the joint capsule into the stretch. Holding the foot in this way is going to give you even more load down through the quadriceps and through that anterior portion of the thigh. In each pose, we're spending about 2 minutes, working with the breath throughout. As you inhale, you'll notice a natural tensioning of the body, and when you exhale, there's a sense of release, relaxation, and depth into the pose. Let's just spend 2 more breaths here before the transition. To come out, you're going to reverse order. Lift the knee, step forward, and we'll transition. Keep the band where it is, and we're going to work into our triangle pose. For this one, the band remains on the inner right thigh, then we're going to step the left foot away. So the band is helping to pull the femur bone back and toward the wall, or it's pulling the femur out of the hip socket. Now working into a dynamic triangle pose, you're going to simply hinge to that left side, and then you'll come back out. Do this several times to help you to locate the best position. Once you feel comfortable, then you can stay. Rather than putting the pressure or the intention into the left side or the straight hamstring side, we're feeling how that back leg is continuing to be loaded and pulled. Let's add some neck rotation. Here you're going to look down to the floor and then turn the head and look up to the neck. This cervical rotation. Maintain a neutral position of the head. So the head is pulled back slightly. There's a tendency for it to sink forward, so you want to maintain that neutral head. As you inhale, you'll look down to the floor. And as you exhale, you'll rotate the head and look up to the right thumb. Inhaling, turn the head 90 degrees down. Exhale, turn the head 90 degrees up. Let's add some shoulder scaption here. So we're reaching the hand up and over. And this should help you to feel the length of the entire right side of the body. We can continue adding movement here. You're going to reach the arm up and over, and then exhale back and down. This will help you to feel the dynamic lengthening of the side body as well as the upper trapezius and shoulder. So remember, in these positions, the tendency is to become static or just to hang out, as it were. But we understand that adding movement is very useful for pumping the blood and lymph throughout the system. Transitioning to the side angle, bending that left knee to 90 degrees. Here we continue to feel the support of that back leg. The tendency when moving into a side angle is to sink down through the back leg. I always call this having a flat tire as that back knee bends. Transitioning up, now moving into a wide feet fold, you're going to turn so the feet are straight or parallel, and then starting to work into that forward fold. The band is doing two things here. One is that it's maintaining a proper hip hinge because the band is helping you to support the hip joint, and the band is pulling the femur wide. In yoga, we like to give the cue of thighs out. So instead of doing this through a muscular action, the band itself is helping us to support this anatomical movement of the thigh outward, which is a combination of thigh abduction and external rotation. Transitioning now for the reverse lunge. Here you're continuing to work into that anterior hip pocket on that right side, and you're feeling how the band supports you in a different way. Reach the right arm up and overhead. This will help you to maintain length through the entire right side body. And this is so useful as we feel a connection point between the leg, the side, and the arm. Transition out. You're going to simply walk back toward the wall, step your right foot out and the left leg in. Pull the band underneath the left side gluteal fold, and we'll continue working into our lunge series, now on the left side. The band is so powerful for working with the joint capsules. Often in our yoga or mobility practice, we're focusing on stretching the muscles, the soft tissues, or the fascias. And while that certainly is important, we also have this dynamic of working with the joint capsules themselves. Here, the band is literally pulling the femur bone forward into the hip socket. I'm sure that you can really feel this action. You can visualize how that femur bone is moving forward into the hip. Working into the deep lunge. If you're continuing with this, you're going to work on lifting up that back heel. Now, this one can be quite challenging. If you're not yet holding the foot, don't worry about it. You can either just lift the foot and hold the position. You'll notice how the dynamic begins to change in the leg. You can feel the stretching or the loading of the tissue starts to move down lower toward the belly of the thigh, or possibly toward the attachments down into the knee. Of course, if you are able to hold the foot, this is going to give you an additional movement or stretching action along the chest. Similar to that doorway stretch, you can feel how the shoulder now is going to horizontally abduct or open back and out. As always, we're working with our breathing. Remember, inhales create a natural increase of tension in the body. The intra-abdominal pressure increases. And exhales create a release of that tension, a deepening, a stretching. Just give it a couple more breaths here. Really savor this action of opening up that anterior chain. And then we'll transition. We're slowly working out of the position. Simply release the foot, lift the knee up, and then in reverse order, we're going to step forward to the wall. And we can work into our left side triangle. Here we have the band supporting really up into the groin area, and that's going to help you to feel the support into the back side of the body. As we mentioned on the other side, we normally feel in the triangle pose more of an emphasis of the leg that we're bending toward. But what's really great here is that we can feel support in the backside leg, so you feel a much greater sense of stability and support. We can feel how the tissues load along the outer portion of the left hip into the IT band, the glutes, especially the glute medius. And then you can feel that movement or stretch into that left side body, into the obliques. The head rotation, you look down to the floor and then back up to the hand. Here I'm self-adjusting. I'm reaching my right hand to the left rib cage just to add a bit more weight in the position, and that helps to get more into the obliques, the quadratus lumborum area, that tricky muscle of the low back. Let's continue adding movement here. You can work into that scaption movement as you reach the left arm up and over. See if you can feel even more connection points. The left arm connecting to the left side body, connecting all the way down through the outer left leg, down into the outer left heel. Transitioning into the side angle by bending the right knee 90 degrees. If you're not able to get the right knee 90 degrees, don't worry about that. That's really just a direction that we're moving in. Individual results will vary. As you're here, keeping that left arm connecting to the side all the way down to that outer left heel. It's really interesting to feel those fascia connections through that lateral line of the body. Transitioning for the wide feet fold. Here we feel how the band is supporting the hip joint and pulling the thigh out, giving you a bit more space in the hips. Many of us in modern life do struggle with that acetabular impingement, or the tightness along the front of the hip joint. That means that our range of motion is not limited so much by a muscular tightness like tight hamstrings, but it's actually a joint tightness where that femur bone has bumped up against the acetabulum or the hip socket. So here we're able to unimpinge the hip joint and then moving to the fold with a much deeper position. Continue breathing. You should really feel how the breath moves more into the back of the heart, which is a natural dynamic whenever we maintain engagement of the low belly, as in making a bandha, that naturally moves the breath laterally into the side body and posteriorly into the back of the heart. So rather than the belly moving with the breath, we feel the breath moving wide and into the back. When you do transition up, work on engaging through the glutes and move with the power of the posterior chain. Setting the reverse lunge shape. Here you're going to work on moving the back leg into a dynamic lunge and just work in and out of this position. Remember, keep squeezing the glutes to maintain neutral. The band is going to give you excellent feedback for this. Working with your breath, always in and out with control. Add movement with the arms, so you load up even more tissues into the dynamic of this posture. That left arm overhead, the thumb moves straight up and back. Transitioning out of the position, you're going to slowly walk back, unloading the tension from the band. And let's transition. Now move the band up high. You want to get the band up high. It's going to make it easier for you to then move the arm into an overhead position. Let's first establish the neutral or stable shoulder position with the shoulder lock. So the band is going to pull the arm forward, right? It protracts the arm. So your job then is to retract the shoulder. You're going to work on pulling the arm back and into the body, or locking the arm back and down. Now, notice that it's not an elbow bend here, but you're feeling the muscles underneath the shoulder, the latissimus and the bra strap muscles that lock the arm back and down. As you move the arm forward, that will give you a stretching action, and then as you move it back and down, the stable action. Extend the right leg back and hinge forward about 90 degrees. This is going to move the arm up and overhead and helps you to move into a full shoulder flexion position. And this is really an incredible stretch. Normally when we reach our arm overhead, we're using the upper traps to move the arm up. Now we're actually using the lower traps and the latissimus to maintain shoulder stability, or locking it back and down, and then the arm is being pulled overhead by the band. Let's continue working now into the side angle. You'll turn the right thigh out, that moves the right heel down and toward the floor, and you'll find yourself transformed into that side angle pose. Now, let's see if we can feel a connection here. You're going to feel the right arm connecting to the right side body, connecting down through the outer right hip, all the way down through the outer right heel. You're going to have to continue reaching back and down through the outer right heel. And as you're doing this, you should feel an incredible emphasis of the body stretching through the lateral line. Transition out. You're going to simply step forward, unload the tension, and then switch sides. Let's work on that shoulder locking position here on the left side. So the band is going to move the arm forward into the protraction that unwinds the arms, similar to throwing a punch. And then you're going to work on loading the arm by pulling back and down, the locking of the armpit bandha, or armpit lock. The overhead shoulder position, so we stretch back through that left leg, or the same side leg, hinging forward 90 degrees to move the arm up and overhead. Take your time here. There's certainly a tendency to get in a hurry, so we want to work on feeling the connection point through that left side body. And then we can work into the angle pose. Here you rotate the left thigh out, and you're going to continue reaching back and down through the outer left heel. Now, even if it's not possible to get the foot down fully flat, that's not the important part. The most important part is that you're continuing the action of reaching the heel back and down. So you're maintaining that active work in the body. Stay with your breathing. Can you feel that increase of pressure in the inhale? Can you feel that release and stretch in the exhale? Can you feel the loading along the entire lateral chain of the body? Transition out, walking the body forward, and unload the band. Let's adjust the band back down to hip height, and then we're going to work into the knees, supporting the back of the knee with the band. Now, when you step back, make sure that you're directly in line with your band. You don't want the band to pull the knee too much to the inside. If it's cheating to pull out a little bit, that's going to be better. But ideally, you want it to be straight ahead. So we're just going to work with a little flexion and extension of the knee here. That band is going to naturally pull the knee forward, and then it's going to create a flexion gap behind the knee crease. And this is very useful for those of us who have knee weakness, possibly the weakness of the hamstrings. This is going to be very useful for strengthening those muscle groups. Transitioning into the warrior two position by raising the arms. So we've got level hips, level ribs, and level shoulders. You're going to feel quite a challenge here to support this position. So we really notice the strength building part of mobility. Stay with the breath for just a few more reps. and then transition out, stepping the left foot forward, and then we'll come out. We're going to do the other side. So the left knee is banded, and then we're going to start to step back. If this feels uncomfortable, like your skin is being pulled or the hair of your legs is being pulled, then using something like a towel behind the knee and the band can be quite useful to prevent that pulling on the skin. Or you can just enjoy that stretching of the skin or stretching of your fascia, and don't worry so much about the discomfort here. So you're just warming up by flexing and extending the knee a few times, and then we'll work into that more classic lunge shape or the warrior two shape. So take your time. Again, make sure that you've got your knee in line with the band, and then you're going to just work in and out a few times. That in and out action is very useful for adjusting into a better position. Once you're ready for warrior two, the arms up level to the shoulders, and then the head rotates nicely on the axis, looking out over that left hand. Collect several breaths in the warrior two, and then transitioning out. We'll once again set up for our resting squat. This time the band is going to be higher. So we pull the band right up underneath the bra strap muscles. Step back, load tension into the band, hands behind the head, and then we're going to work into the squat. So here we just changed the bias a bit from earlier. This is going to work directly into our next sequence, which is the twisting squat. But before we get there, just enjoy this position. Hopefully you can feel deeper ankle flexion, your knees should feel deeper, and the hips certainly feel deeper. Loading up maximum tension into the band. Of course, there's always a sweet spot. Into the squat twist. Left hand's going to hold that right foot, and then reach the right arm up and back. This is an incredible movement where we're able to feel the lift up out of the hips. Oftentimes we experience a sense of compression through the low back. Normally the force of gravity is compressing those joints, and we don't get a whole lot of movement here. But in this resting squat with the twist, we're able to truly lift up and out of the hips and create much greater length, space, and depth. In between reps, we're just going to push the knees out. Now keep pressing down through the big toe. That helps you to maintain a neutral foot position. And then as the knee pushes out, that's going to give you a greater depth along the hip joint. Now, with the hands on the outside of the knee, use the hands to push the knees in, but keep pushing the knees out. This is going to help you to load up the outer hip muscles, especially the gluteus medius. Continue working with that resistance. So the hands push the knees in, but the knees are continuing to push outward. This is similar to the action of monster walks, which is another popular banded exercise. But again, the idea here is knees out or thighs out. Into our second round of the banded twist, you'll probably be able to get a much greater thoracic rotation in the second round as you're beginning to warm up. Just collecting a few breaths and then switch for the left side. So the thumb is reaching straight back. You're in that thumbs up position that helps you to maintain the proper rotation of the shoulder. And then as comfortable, you can look up to that hand. Now work on internal rotation of the shoulders. The arms turn in. You can reach the hands back so that your hands are resting on your waist. and now the knees are going to squeeze in. That's going to give a greater assist of the shoulder rotation. As the knees are squeezing in, the elbows are pushing out. This is similar to the bat stretch, which is a popular internal rotation exercise. Using that resistance. Remember, inhales create tension. It's a very natural phenomenon. Exhales, relaxation. And that way you can move into your in range. Finishing up our squat, we're going to push back into the band to stand and come out with control. You can adjust the band up a bit higher. We're going to start working into shoulder work here. So go ahead and place the band around the front of the left shoulder joint. Now you want to step the right foot forward so you're into a modified lunge shape. When you move the arm across the body, the band creates a bit of a flexion gap for your shoulder. And then as you exhale, you can open the arm back wide, similar to the doorway stretch. So inhale, reach the arm across the body. Exhale, open back. Now work at various heights with the arm, changing the position from shoulder height to above shoulder height to below shoulder height are going to help you to work into different fibers of the chest muscle. If you visualize the pectorals as a fan shape, working at different angles will help you to work into different fibers of that fan. And we're usually repeating these active stretches anywhere between 5 and 10 reps. You can think of this very much as like reps and sets in your strength training. So you might do anywhere between 1 and 3 sets, and then usually between 5 and 10 reps per set. Just changing to that right side, the band is around that front of the right shoulder joint, and then we're moving with the arm across the body and then reaching it back and out. Inhaling and exhale. We'll just complete 2 more of these and one more big stretch of the arm and the shoulder. And we'll transition out. So as you're coming out, we'll transition now. This one's a bit complicated, so we're going to use internal shoulder rotation to move into a reverse prayer. Place the band around your thumbs. Now start with the hands in a downward prayer position. Walk forward, and what you'll feel is that the band internally rotates the shoulders and it moves you into that reverse prayer. Now, this is going to be quite an advanced position. You're going to turn so that you're facing your band and then move into your squat shape. So the band is continuing to pull the arms up into the internal rotation, and it's sliding the hands higher up the back. This is quite an advanced drill and will not be available for everyone. But this is one thing that I wanted to include for all of my yoga friends who are working on this reverse prayer pose. So we're really taking that full Malasana shape. We've dropped into our resting squat position, and then you're using the banded distraction to pull you all the way up into internal rotation. As you dismount from the band, you can just take a moment to notice the hands pushing back into the reverse prayer. Really pressing the hands here for a moment. And release. Lower the band again. You're going to go quite low with this as we work into our seated series. For the seated position, we're going to slide the band again around the low back, right above the hip joint, and then sink down into your resting squat position. So again, it's that continued pushing back into the band that helps you to sink down nicely. Now, working into Baddha Konasana, or the bound angle position, the band is going to support the low back, We want to again cultivate that feeling of lengthening up and out of the hip sockets. And then start walking your hands backwards. What you'll notice here is that the band is enabling the pelvis to tilt forward. As the hips rotate forward, that's going to help you to feel the knees drop closer to the floor. So you get a greater sense of thigh abduction, and you have that sense of feeling empty through the groins. Continue breathing here. And we'll transition, working the hips back a little bit further, and then starting to move into the forward angle position. Now, there's no need to go all the way forward. If you go too far, you'll notice the band slides up the back. So you just want to leverage forward a bit, and the band is going to give you that assistance. Now, keep the back straight. So you're working on lifting up and into the band, and then we can add a bit of a side movement. So it's interesting here that you can start to notice that there's a connection between the hips and the low back. You can really begin to visualize those connecting layers of fascia, or those fascial sheets in the body, how everything is connected to everything. And we're going to transition for the open angle pose. Go ahead and open the legs out. We're opening about 120 degrees here, the classic Upavishta Konasana position. And go ahead and angle your trunk forward. Same as Baddha Konasana, we want to feel how the spine stays completely upright. That way you have a bit of support as the band is pulling you forward. So I always think of this as a reverse psychology for your body. You have to lift up and resist the pull of the band forward, keeping the legs strong, the thighs bright, kneecaps pulled up, and that's going to give you a much greater lengthening and opening of the hamstrings and adductor muscles. Now, walking the hands back, this is going to tilt the hips forward even more, and you'll notice you're hollowing the lower back. Feel your low belly is long, and continue brightening the legs here. And coming out of the position, we're going to move into our last resting squat pose. And take a moment to notice the difference between this variation of the squat and the one that you began your practice with. Hopefully you're noticing a much deeper squat position, much deeper through all of the joints, especially the hip joints. And as we complete our cycle, we're going to work on standing. Remember to stand, you push the hips back into the band. So instead of the tendency to fall forward, you're pushing back and using the power of the legs to stand. Go ahead and transition forward, and we'll come out. Preparing our pigeon pose. You're going to step the right leg into the band. Now go ahead and pull the band up around the bikini line. So you're blocking that right hip joint. Then step right foot forward, you're into the lunge position. Now working into the pigeon, you're going to step the right foot across the midline toward the left side hand. Now take your time here. If you have a limited range of motion in the hips, which is common, you might not be able to drop that knee open completely right away. You also might not have your leg quite at 90 degrees right away. So take your time here. Remember to add movement in the position. The idea of movement is that we continue pumping blood, oxygen, and lymph into the tissues. This is how the tissues will heal and recover. This is how the tissues will increase in their mobility. As you angle the trunk forward, that's going to increase the depth of the stretch in the pigeon pose. Continue breathing. Send the breath all the way down to the outer right hip. We're going to be feeling this through the piriformis, the glutes, and the associated tissues along the outer right side. Not only are you feeling the muscle stretch in this position, you're noticing that deepening of the hip joint itself. And let's work on adding some movement in the trunk. We're first going to rotate toward that pigeon side leg, so you're rotating the trunk a little bit more to the right. Notice how that begins to wind up that hip joint, so you're going to really feel a deepening of the position. Keep leaning into this. Avoid the tendency to fall over to one side. You're going to have to keep working your hips back to the center as you rotate the trunk to the right. We'll finish with our deepest variation on the pigeon stretch. Here you're going to walk the hands away from the pigeon side to the left. Now try to work that right elbow down to the instep of the right foot. You might not be able to get there right away. No matter, you're going to continue working through your own in-range position. Remember to breathe and remember to use the contract and relax method. To dismount, use control. You're going to progressively start to work that right leg back into the lunge shape. And then with control, you'll step back to your forward bend position. Remember, push the hips into the band to stand with control. Transitioning for the left side. As you step back, go ahead and put the left foot into the band. You'll pull that band all the way up into the groin area around your bikini line. Then stepping that left foot forward into the lunge shape. Take a moment here to reorganize. As you guide that right knee down, you'll prepare yourself for the pigeon. Stepping the left foot across the midline and toward that right hand. Now, our goal is to load up sensation or stretching into that outer hip. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to move right away into the pigeon. In fact, that's a big mistake that we'll see amongst yogis, is that they'll immediately sort of flop into a position rather than chasing sensation, rather than trying to find where the work needs to be. So instead of flopping into a position, go in with a certain intention. The intent here is to wind up the stretch or the load into the outer hip and to move into an effective pigeon shape. Certain dynamics remain the same. We're always working toward a neutral spine position, and you always want to make sure that you can breathe. Breath is a great test on the correctness of the alignment. If you have trouble breathing, if you're finding yourself straining a position, then probably your alignment's going to be off. If you can still breathe deeply, if you still have a little bit of space remaining in the leg, in the hip, a little bit of space for movement, then that's a good thing. So I would say to work at about 80 to 90% of your total in-range potential, working into that rotation. So here you work that left elbow down to the instep of the left foot. Best you can. And if you're not quite there, then you just stay with one of the intermediate phases toward that full in range. And as we begin to transition back to our upright position, continue feeling the depth of the hip joint. Continue feeling that external rotation and abduction in that left thigh. Preparing for our transition out of the position completely. Remember, the goal is to move with control. So as you begin to transition, you're going to think about moving the left leg back to the lunge shape. You're going to think about guiding the body smoothly back toward the forward bend and then eventually back to the mountain. Let's transition. We're going to guide the band higher up. You're going to place the band about shoulder height now. We're going to work toward our final sequence. These are reclined positions. For this, you're going to be set up a little bit closer to the wall. As you're moving toward the position, go ahead and lie down with your head toward the band. Then set up in a position that you can put the right foot up into the band. Once you're there, you're then going to shift slightly forward and away from the band. This will help you to load up even more tension, and it's going to give you the potential for a greater stretch through that hip and hamstring. Now we can really engage our PNF, that facilitated stretching technique. With your inhale, you're going to kick that right foot forward into the band. That's going to load up tension. And then in the exhale, the band itself is going to assist you and move into the stretch position. You're going to repeat this about 5 times. When you inhale, contract for about 5 seconds. When you exhale, relax and stretch for about 10 seconds. Notice that by pushing the leg into the band, it actually helps you to release the hip joint. And then as you exhale into the stretch, you also will feel how the femur head sinks deeper into the hip. So we feel this constant interplay that using contract relax not only facilitates a deeper muscle stretching, but it also helps to improve the joint mechanics. And I really like this technique because instead of cueing precise alignment, move your body this way or that way, we can actually use tension itself, and we can use movement itself to facilitate greater alignment or joint congruency, which is the goal of alignment. So switching to that left leg, same technique. You're going to contract, you're going to kick the foot away, the contract phase for about 5 seconds, then relax and stretch for about 10 seconds. Instead of a partner, the band is now your partner and it's pulling you back nicely into the stretch. Complete about 5 repetitions, or feel free with big muscles, strong muscles like the hamstrings and the glutes to stay for even longer. Perhaps you want to hold a sustained contraction for a minute even. And then once that muscle is fatigued, when you exhale and relax, it's going to receive a much greater lengthening. Finally, we're preparing for the shoulder standing sequence. And we'll do a few rounds of a dynamic jackknife shoulder stand before we stay. Here you're going to kick both legs into the band. That will bring the entire body up into the shoulder stand position. And then when you sequence down, come down with control from top to bottom, articulating through each spinal joint. Contracting, inhale, kick the heels into the band to move upright. Then exhaling, twice as slow on your descent. Can you feel each vertebrae imprinting into the yoga mat beneath? And then let's stay in the position. Once you kick into the band, move upright, and then you can bend the arms and support the back. Keep kicking the feet into the band. So we're going to feel the loading along the posterior chain. You can kick one leg out at a time. You're moving into a single leg bridge position. And this is really an excellent way to receive a stretch along the anterior chain of one leg, or the psoas along one leg, while maintaining that upright shoulder standing position. Take your time with this. This is quite an advanced sequence. Not only are you having to find your balance here while being supported upside down, but you're also working into ranges of motion that might be new for you. We'll complete our cycle moving back into that shoulder stand position. Notice how much more upright you are now. And then we'll transition slowly down using the controlled action, maintaining the engagement through the abdomen, maintaining the engagement through the supporting muscles along the posterior as you find your way down to the mat. Our final sequence is the neck traction as we set up for a type of corpse pose. Here you're going to adjust and guide the band, so it's going to be just under the base of your skull, the occiput area. And once you're set up in this position, go ahead and adjust the body slightly away from the band, and then gradually begin to unwind out into a classic corpse pose. In this position, you're going to feel how the band is pulling the head back toward the wall. You're going to feel the natural lengthening and decompressing along the spine. The head will be possibly lifted by 1 centimeter off the floor. It doesn't need to be too high. And it should feel like you're supported, as though you're being cradled. Once you're set up and you feel comfortable, begin a conscious unwinding of the body. Feel that sense of relaxation spreading through your feet, your legs. Feel that sense of relaxation through your knees. Relax your thighs. Relax your hips. Feel that wave of relaxation moving through your belly, the lower back. Feel that sense of relaxation through your arms, your neck. The face is soft. Feeling the whole body completely relax. Letting go the body. Letting go the breath. Feeling your whole self heavy with relaxation. we'll make our final transition, adjusting out of the band. Very consciously reach back. You're going to release the head down to the mat. And as we move into our final relaxation pose, allow yourself the opportunity to completely dissolve, feeling the after effect of the practice.